Three, two, what? Are we going? Are we on? February 21st. We good?
I think so.
Hi, folks. Welcome. No, can't do that? What kind of? Don't tell me that in the middle of me doing it. Are we up and ready?
We are live as far as I know.
Can you confirm that for me?
Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah, they can see it.
Okay.
Filming.
Hi, folks. Welcome to our first. What is it? Live episode. I'm just trying to get you some dates. Sorry, it's a last minute thing. So, welcome to our members, and welcome to those who are visiting us for the first time. So, this is a little bit different than what we would normally do. Just to tell you real quick, we run an online workshop. We're in our 7th or 8th year. We film 3 45-minute episodes every week, walking through the process of building a piece of furniture. This is exciting because we're in the design phase of the next project, which I love doing. I always design with a mock-up, and we're also finishing off our last project. Anyway, so we shoot from the hip. Nothing is scripted. We film it as it happens, which means multiple screw-ups, but that's the process you go through when you're doing one-offs, and you have to fix them. You have to learn how to fix them. So we give you all of that. First thing I want to do is tell you some upcoming dates. If you're interested in learning how to cut dovetails by hand, my method, or if you're interested in learning how to freehand sharpen, set up your hand plane, and make it work so that you can literally finish right from the hand plane, I will be at the Ventura, California Woodcraft store on February 7th, 8th, and 9th. Now, the 7th is a special session just for veterans, and it's free to them, and it'll be an introduction to hand tool woodworking. I'll tell you everything you want to know and teach you everything you want to know. On the 8th is an all-day workshop learning how to sharpen, set up, sharpen, tune, and use your hand plane to perfection. And on the 9th, which is a Saturday, is an all-day hand-cut dovetail workshop. Then on February 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, Jake and I will be at and Super Dave, don't forget Super Dave, at the Toronto Wood Show, which will be at the International Center in Mississauga, Ontario. It's a brand new show, and we'll be doing seminars all day long. If you are a vet, combat wounded vet in particular, please come by and see me. Got something special for you, as many as we can find. Then we will be in Florida. Don't have these dates nailed down. I'm working to do that, and that is going to be somewhere between the March 1st. It'll either be the weekend of March 1 and 2 or March 8 and 9, and I'll be at the Clearwater Woodcraft just outside of Tampa, and possibly at the Orlando, thank you, Woodcraft. And the final one I have for you is I'll be at the Woodcraft in Seattle, teaching a 3-day workshop. First one is hand planes and sharpening. Second one is dovetails. Third one is advanced dovetails. And I'm pretty sure that is going to be March 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Check the websites for those woodcraft stores to get the exact. Now, I just want to give you I always like to tell the guys what we're doing, because this is our new shop, for those of you who don't know about it. Should I stay put over there? And this was an old bowling lane, so you can see on the floor the lanes and where the gutters used to be. We took the ceiling out, insulated, did the whole thing. I started a project in March of, we didn't name it but in March of 2016 called the Purple Heart Project, where we teach combat wounded veterans traditional hand tool skills for building furniture with just hand tools. Am I looking here or am I looking there? I'll look in the middle. And we do this as a thank you to them. They put their life on the line for us. Least we can do is help mediate some of their pain. So we cover, when we bring these guys in, we do it 4 times a year. We bring them in, we cover their airfare, their hotel, their meals, and we send, each vet goes home with $2,000 worth of premium hand tools. One of our saws, planes, sharpening gear, the very best stuff, everything that I use. So we have been doing that in Niagara Falls, Ontario, but it's been expensive because the place we rent costs us $10,000 a year, plus we have to travel up there. So now that we have this new shop, I don't know if you can see out here or not, but we are working on, this is the main shop where we produce all our tools, where we do our filming, we build furniture. But out here is a 1,000 square foot room that will be our teaching shop. We'll have 12, depending on how many we can fit in, maybe as many as 14 benches. It'll be the best lit shop in the world. It's going to be perfect. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Our first class is going to be May 6th. Every time we do the class, we bring in 6 paying customers who come in as students. In fact, they are an integral part of the process because they actually are part of the therapy for the vets. And I'm learning this as I go. In addition to those 6, we bring in at least 6 combat wounded veterans. Our selection process will take place around the end of February. We need time to get their flights booked and the whole bit. So if you know, or if you are a combat wounded veteran, go to my site, RobCosman.com. And on the top banner, on the far left, says PHP, Purple Heart Project. This is not just for Americans. This is anyone. We have had Canadians, Australians, and Americans. We've possibly will have a Brit coming this time. Anyway, go on there, and all the information, all you have to do is prove that you're honorably discharged. Write us a half a page as if you're talking to your therapist, and tell us your situation. We have to know those facts because that's all we have to base our decision on. And like triage in an emergency room, we are looking for the people who are bleeding the worst that need the help immediately. And if you're a civilian and you would like to have an awesome week where you will learn a ton of woodworking, but you will go home a better person for having been around these guys, then sign up. First class is full, sorry. Second class might have one spot. We're already taking reservations for the October workshop. All right, ready now? Go to work? Okay, I guess I'm supposed to ask some questions. So the other format we were trying to do here is, I'm so terrible at getting on my own online workshop and answering questions. I thought, let's do this once every 2 weeks. We'll host a live session on Friday where we will answer questions. So is there anyone that I need to answer? I did that. I did the first one where I'm going to be.
Okay. I don't see any questions. Just a couple people. Brian and Carlos want you to go to New York.
Okay, be right there. Well, you find a woodcraft store in your neighborhood or in the closest one to you and tell them you want Rob to come, and that's how it'll happen. So if a question pops up, just yell and I'll answer it. So this, what I have in front of me, what? Yeah. Well, I'll show it first. Was it Ty? Ty was one of our combat wounded vets in our last class, and he presented me with this really cool Special Forces. Has a dagger in there, a sheath, and the Canadian and the American. And Special Forces was a joint venture between Canadians and Americans. I think it was formed in 1942. But the case that it came in was lacked a little bit. There's a staple sticking out, and it wasn't very well made. So I asked Ty, I said, do you mind if I built a case more fitting for this? And he said, absolutely. No, he didn't mind. So we did it. I had some gorgeous walnut that I got that was gunstock walnut. And we put in mitered edge dovetails and set in this piece of plexiglass instead of glass. But anyway, let me bring it over and I'll show you. We got to finish it. We got to clean it up, and we got to put the glass or get it all done. So there's what it is. And then if you can you see, does that show up well enough, that figure on there? Gorgeous wood, absolutely gorgeous wood. But it was a bear to work because it's almost like alternating end grain, long grain, end grain, long grain. It was tough. We had a lot of challenges in building it. Now I've got to get that back out so that I can. What I want to do before we finish this off is the plexiglass is loose. So I've got to go in there and wedge that somehow, but I've got to wedge it in such a way that you don't see it. That's why I'm not going to use silicone or anything like that. So what I'm hoping to do is go make some really long, narrow, long grain wedges and just go in there and do it neatly. I also want to get back to working on our next project is a standing desk. And as I mentioned, we're in the design phase of that. So I want to be able to get back to it. Now, when we put this in, and I hope this works, it's really snug.
Jade asked you to show off your apron.
Oh, hey, Jade. Jade that we know?
Jade Shiraz.
Jade was one of our combat wounded veterans. And I apologize because I'm losing some. So I could talk about this all night, but you guys might not want that. So I got to say hello to Colonel Luther. He's probably weighs about 300 pounds right now. He just got off a 10-day cruise, second one in a month. He's at the trough all day long, all night. Anyway, Colonel Luther Sheely, retired colonel, is our right-hand man. It's Jake and I and Super Dave and the colonel that run this program. And he surprised me one day. He got one of our aprons, and he had, I don't know which one was our first one, Jake. Henry, this one. He got all the guys that were in the class to send in their patch. Now, if you're not familiar with military, you are always assigned to a different unit, and the unit will have their unit patch. So the one that meant the most to them, they sent to me, the colonel, and he had them sewn on here. And every spring and every fall, I get a new apron. So this was the latest, but I'm hard on it, and some of them are coming off. I'm going to get them sewn back on. But we have also got to start getting the guys to sign them on the backside. So where's Jade? I can't read upside down. Anyway, so yeah, that's the story behind the apron. This carries a lot of weight in my book. We're going to build some nice shadow boxes, and those will all be up on the backdrop. And by the way, this is all stuff that vets have given to us. And was it Joseph that sent us that? Joseph out in Washington made this Purple Heart thing. It's really cool. We got 2 of them actually. So lots of stuff behind me, and asking if you want to know something specific. All right, now I got to get this thing out. I'm hoping to get just enough thread on there to be able to pull that up. There. Now, what we did on this, I was going to use leather, but I ended up using black felt. And the knife is on with a couple of magnets. That's why you see the screw holes in the back, rare earth magnets. We put these on with hot melt glue as well as the sheath. Now, I need some air. Let me work on this for about, how far into our 45-minute episode are we?
13 minutes.
Okay. Well, at about the 20-minute mark, I want to go to work on that. I really want to get at that. Okay, so I don't have, Jake, you can get close. So I've got, I'm trying to think of how best to tackle that. I don't want it to be rattling. I want it to look nice and tight when it's out here, but I also don't want anything to show. And I don't think it's deep enough. Well, yes, we just wouldn't do a narrow wedge. We'd do a fairly wide wedge. This is where I normally would shut the camera down and spend a few minutes thinking about it, but the other camera is continuing to roll, so.
They're fine.
Huh? They're fine? Okay, shut it down for a second while I come up with an idea. Now you get to sit there and just watch me stare at this thing. Part of the problem is that if we put in a piece of walnut, we're going to have to put a finish on it as well, or else it'll show. I don't want to just put it in spots because I think it'll be seen because there's enough of a gap there. Be able to see it from that side. I should have checked to see the thickness of the plexiglass before I cut it. I just assumed it was 1/8 of an inch. Bad assumption. Well, all right, turn it on. Let's go. I'm going to get a piece of, actually, just let me grab a piece of walnut real quick and see what we can do. Audio's still live, Frick, even though they can't. If we get a chance this afternoon, I want to bring them back and show them the lumber rack that Ken's been working on. Jake, is that thing 20 inches long? Can you measure? What is it? Huh? 20? Okay. Let's go. So, Frick, I got to be over here at the table, so are you going to try to follow me with that? You making them sick with that, waving that wand all around like that? Holy. So, let me just explain what this is. This came up on auction, and I bought it. We just picked it up today. This is an Excalibur dust collector that attaches to this end of the bench, and then that thing sits up over top of the table saw, the actual blade, and hopefully you don't get dust in your face anymore. So we haven't hooked it up yet. It just came today, but looking forward to it. Always wanted something like that. So I got a piece of black walnut. I'm going to have to joint this. Turn on. That's our new Oneida dust collector. I can't remember the model number, but it's got tons of power. Now, I'm going to plane this before I work on it because obviously I can't do that after the fact. It's going to be too small. For those of you who have seen this 1,000 times, I apologize, but for the new people, I want to walk you through this real quick. I'm going to go through sharpening a blade. What? That one is? Already sharp, you mean? And that's that one that really hard. So if you want to check your plane blades to see if you've got a good edge before you go through the process of sharpening, take your fingernail. You got to be really careful when you do this. It's one of those don't try this at home things. Have it facing you this way. The boy knows how to sharpen. If you run your fingernail, just watch me draw blood. You run your fingernail along that edge, and it should be just as smooth as glass. If it catches anywhere, then you've got a nick in your blade that's going to show up as a little bump in the wood. But that was flawless. At some point today I will sharpen, promise, but this one's already ready to go. Put the chip breaker on. Now the chip breaker, which supports the cutting edge, let me get in there good and close so you can see. I'm about a 32nd of an inch away from the edge. And you want to snug this up really tight because part of the adjustment in the plane is made through the chip breaker. It has to pull the blade along with it. Set that in there carefully. Put the lever cap on. This blade's thicker than the last one, so I have to back that off a little bit. Snap that in place. Now you want enough tension that this thing won't move accidentally when you're planing. Oh, wait a minute, now that's not sitting down there properly. What's going on here, Jake? That's not sitting down tight. Remember I said we didn't rehearse things? It looks like that this is not the standard blade for this plane. What?
On the other one, you had ground that out.
I did, and this is a brand new one? Okay, so the bearing on the end of the chip breaker, on the end of the lateral adjustment lever, is too wide for that slot. And that blade has not been used, so it's not going to get used either, not tonight. I'll have to fix it. So that'll give me a chance to show you what I'm going to do right now. Okay, I use 2 stones, 1,000 grit. This is a Trend diamond plate. Don't take this as a commercial. But if I don't tell you the brands, how are you going to know? It's made by a company called Trend. I think they're great. I use them. They're fast. The Shapton is even better, but it's double the price. So I start with 1,000 grit. I finish with a 16,000 grit Shapton glass stone. I use the opposite side. This diamond plate is double-sided. 1,000 grit on one side, 300 on the other. I use the 300 grit side to lap the ceramic stone to keep it flat. 3 to 5 seconds is all it takes. And then coat both stones with a little bit of Honrite. Honrite is a water additive that inhibits water from rusting metal. So safe to use on this, safe to use on this. Nice and quick. So take my blade. I keep my sharpening station down. Oh, you got the other one off. That's good. Then my sharpening station is kept low on purpose. And the reason is, if you try to freehand sharpen with your blade or your stone up here at bench height, and you start this little circular motion, which by the way is so much easier than trying to do figure eights, your first thing you realize is if you don't move, you're going to wear that part of the stone out. So to this motion, you have to introduce this motion. And in the process of trying to do both, people make an absolute mess of it. What I discovered from watching people was that if you moved your sharpening station down here, you could lean over the stone. And by leaning over the stone, the first thing is it moves your pivot point from your wrist. You can move it all the way up to your shoulder. Well, the farther away you can get your pivot point, the easier it is to maintain that little angle. Second advantage is by standing over top of it, instead of moving my arms, I can just rock heel and toe while I'm doing this to cover all of the stone, and then I can focus on this little circular motion and maintaining that angle. Now, the final little bit on this, you want stones that cut as fast as possible because you're trying to freehand hold an angle, and it's not easy. If it takes 20 seconds, you're probably not going to get it, but this thing will do it in 5, 6, 7 seconds. I actually usually go 10, but it's quick. So I hold the blade the same way every time I sharpen. I'm right-handed. So in this hand, I've got my index finger up here at the point. My thumb's over here. My fingers are in this slot. I bring my left hand over. I use my left index finger, and I put it in that hole as an indexing point. I put my pinky out here in the corner, followed by my ring finger, my middle finger, and I kind of slide this one over. The idea is to get as many fingers as possible along the cutting edge. Not back here, but right up there. And by doing that, you can disperse the pressure as evenly as possible. These blades are thick, but if you were to put just pressure like that, you'd end up with 2 streams of shavings, nothing in the middle. If you put too much pressure in doing it like that, you'd end up with a shaving that is throughout the middle but not on the ends. So uniform pressure, 4 fingers all the way across the edge. Not laying flat, right up at the edge, and fingers are almost touching or coming onto the blade at a 90-degree angle. And then final little tidbit, in order to make this work well, instead of having 2 hands working independently, when I grasp it, I squeeze my right thumb between my left thumb and my left index finger, and that ties the two together and they work together. Now, big, wide primary bevel. You see that? It's an advantage of a thick blade. You have a large primary bevel, and this is your reference point. If you're going to freehand sharpen, you always have to have a reference point. By the way, every time you sharpen, you're going to make that secondary bevel, that's what we call it, the little shiny spot you see. We're going to make that a little wider, and eventually it's going to get so wide that it's going to, A, you're going to have too much material to remove, and B, you shrink your primary bevel and makes it difficult to find or locate it on the stone. That's when I go back over to my bench grinder, and I use one of these new diamond wheels because they cut so fast, and I will reestablish my primary bevel. It's serviceable there. I got lots of sharpenings left on that before I have to regrind. Come over here, set that down. Now you'll also notice that I'm not sitting it like this. I'm holding it on an angle. This blade is almost as wide as a stone, and I'm going to do little circles. If I hold it like this, in doing my circles, I'm going to be off the stone part of the time. So by turning it on an angle and doing that, I keep my blade over the stone the entire time. So don't hold it like this, hold it like that, which by the way is far more comfortable. Nice wide stance, a little bit of a bend in the knee. Lean over the stone. So you're going to have to adjust this height to whatever suits you. But
Roger's asking, what's the height of yours?
I was just going to tell you that, Roger. Well, there's my knee, and there's the stone. There's the table. So just a couple inches above my kneecap. But it's going to be different for everybody. And if you've got a bad back, you may have to adjust it. But the idea is you want to be able to lean over, you want to be able to pivot from the shoulder, and you want to be able to move forward and back without having to adjust your arms. So 4 fingers, locate it. If the audio was good, you could actually hear that. Find it. As soon as you get it, then you're going to park that. Now, I don't want to polish all of that bevel. I'm going to do the whole thing before we go back to filming the episode. I don't want to polish that entire bevel, so we introduced a concept called MicroBevels. Most people have heard of that. When we do the MicroBevel, it simply means that we're going to elevate off of the primary, so we're only touching the leading edge. No part of this primary bevel ever touches the wood. So A, the surface quality doesn't matter, and B, why would you polish any more than you need? Polishing all the way down to my finger is not going to improve your cutting edge. Polishing halfway down is not going to improve the cutting edge. Just the bare minimum, right at the edge. So how do we do that? Well, locate it, raise up. Now that's 25 degrees because that's what your primary bevel is typically. Come up 3 or 4 degrees and then park that. And then while holding it, do these little circles. And you may as well practice this on the diamond stone. It doesn't wear nearly as much, but the other stone does, so you can't stay in one spot. So I'm just gradually moving forward on my toes, and then I'll come back. How much pressure? Light to moderate. About the amount of pressure you would need to start to compress a firm grape. Count out 10 seconds. I forgot to do that. But work until you can detect a slight burr on the back side of the blade. Go ahead and feel it. Of course you can't. But I can just feel a burr coming up on that edge. As soon as I do that, I'm done. At least I'm done with that stone. Now I'm going to go over to my 16,000. And by the way, I have a little... Jake, can you grab me a angle trainer? I may as well show them that. Okay, so over here... And somebody asked me this the other day about cross-contamination. I'm not worried about lifting any diamond off of here, but if you are, you can wipe it off before you move on to your finer stone. I've never had an issue, but I believe it is possible. Same thing. Make sure this is wet. It's drying off on me. Same procedure. Find the primary. The only thing we're going to do different, our secondary bevel on this flat stone has straightened our edge. So when we come over here to this fiery fine stone, this is a 16,000 grit. Doesn't move a lot of material very quickly. Thank you, Ken. But it will polish the very leading edge. So by leaving the 1,000 and jumping all the in-between grits and going right to the 16,000, the only way that can happen is when we get here, we have to raise up a little bit higher than we did on this stone. In doing that, now we're only touching the very leading edge. And because that stone is flat, it has produced a straight edge on this blade. That means from corner to corner, it is straight, no curves, shortest distance between 2 points. When I come to this flat stone and raise up higher than I did over there, then the entire edge from corner to corner is touching the stone. And as soon as I start moving it, it starts to go to work on that edge. 10 seconds is all it takes. Find your primary, come up a little bit higher than you did on the previous stone, light to moderate pressure, count out 10 seconds, moving slowly forward so that I'm working the entire surface of the stone. And then come back. I wasn't counting the 10 seconds. At the end of 10 seconds, the only thing I'm going to do different, I'm going to push down on my right index finger for 3 seconds, a little harder than the rest. Then I'm going to push down on my left pinky for 3 seconds, a little harder than the rest. So by doing this, and then by doing this, it creates a slight feathering in the outside corners. And what that does, when I start planing a wide surface, it will help ease off the edges so that I don't have what are called plane tracks. And if I'm taking a light enough pass, I'll be able to make multiple passes, overlapping one over the other, no demarcation, perfect finish. Okay? Yeah, what is it?
Rose Russell, Rob, when you were first
Who asked it?
Rose Russell.
Rhodes?
Rose.
Roves?
When you were first preparing a chisel fresh out of the box, what sharpening stone should I use? I was bought the whole series set as a present.
What? Oh, I really need to know what kind of chisels. The reason I need to know what kind of chisels, if you get really good chisels,
You need to repeat Ken's question.
Ken's question. Oh, you can't hear him? So can I read it, Ken? Where is it? Rob, when you are preparing a chisel fresh out of the box, what sharpening stone should I use? I bought the whole series set as a present. Okay, now I don't know which ones you're talking about, but I'll answer it this way. If you have really good chisels, IBC are really good chisels, Lee Nielsen's are really good chisels, you can start with 1,000 grit. If they're not really good chisels and you got to remove a lot of material to get them flat, and you're working Shapton, you might have to get down to 500, maybe even 220. But here's my advice. If you're buying a chisel that is that out of flat, either you bought the wrong chisel or somebody gave you the wrong chisels. If the company knows what they're doing, they're going to send you that chisel as close to being flat as possible. Can't expect them to go in and do all the polishing. That would require way too many man hours. But they should send it to you ground flat so that your job is not to go in and shape the back, but to merely remove the grinding scratches. If they stopped at, say, 220, then you got to go in and work from there. But you shouldn't be having to take high spots off the chisel, and I've seen some bad ones. So typically, I start at 1,000. If you want to do the expensive but the most efficient, you would start with 1,000 and get rid of all of the factory scratches. Now, this is a hard part to describe because what it produces is just a matte gray finish. And what you're looking for is a very consistent matte gray finish that covers the entire end of the chisel. Once you've done that, then you would jump to the 4,000, and you use the 4,000 to remove the 1,000 scratches. Then you would jump to the 8,000, and you would use the 8,000 to remove the 4,000. Then you would jump to the 16, and you use that to remove the 8,000 scratches. Now, at that point, you never touch the back of your chisel again with anything but the 16,000 grit. Never go back.
Michael Kratky wants to know,
Michael, from New York.
are those grinding wheels diamond or CBN?
CBN. Is that what it is? That's what it is. So, Michael, let me do a commercial for you. If I find something that is fantastic, I tell everybody about it. because I've been down the road of using inferior stuff. So typically on using a bench grinder, in fact, they're made for this, you would use a, where are those stones, Jake? Any idea? The old stones. Are they in this thing that Frick's working on? So traditional stones, they're fired somehow. They're very porous. They're very imprecise in terms of you put them on the grinder and they don't run true, and they're a pain to set up. You've got these bushings that you have to have, and you've got to bush it down to the right size on your grinder. They have paper pads on both sides that have to be left on there because they prevent those washers from squeezing it too tight. And if you're lucky, in the first 5 or 6 tries, you'll get it to run true. But it never worked that way for me. Now, the other problem is that they're very porous. So as you grind, it generates a lot of heat, and you have to constantly be dipping your chisel in water to cool it off or something. Well, I got one of these, what is it, CBN? Whatever. I thought it was an industrial diamond. And I was blown away. I could grind a whole new primary bevel, and the thing would never even heat up. Wouldn't even get so much as too hot to touch. In fact, it would be lukewarm at best. And the best I can guess is these things weigh about 8 pounds. So this becomes its own heat sink. And it was amazing. But the speed at which so 3 things. As soon as you put it on, it's instantly balanced. You never have to shape it. That's actually 2. Number 3 is that it cuts with unbelievable speed. Jake, what's your guess? 3 times faster than? Jake does most of the grinding. 3 to 4 times faster than what you can get off a traditional stone, even a coarse one. And then the last big advantage is that it doesn't overheat the steel. It's just absolutely amazing.
Josh Frost said, I've tried this, which is sharpening, and don't end up with a burr. Should I keep going longer?
So, Josh, do I have to repeat that?
Yeah.
Okay. Josh says, I've tried this and usually don't end up. Jake, should you be filming the other one? No. I tried this and usually don't end up with a burr. Should I keep going longer? Well, yes. Let me make up a good answer for that. You have to have a burr, because until you get a burr, you effectively have not done what you need to do, which is create a new edge. You're only ever going to feel a burr on your first stone, your 1000 grit. So a couple of things may be occurring. Number 1, probably most likely, is that you have not raised up high enough or higher or as high as the previous secondary bevel. Now what I mean by that is you'll eventually have a little secondary bevel on there. So the next time you come to sharpen, you're either sitting on that original secondary, which is a pretty hard thing to do, and in that case you've got to wear all the way through it in order to raise a burr. Or the easiest thing is just to come up a little bit higher than the previous time, and that'll raise a burr really quick. So if you're not doing that, you may still be sitting too low. You've got to come up a little bit higher. Let me back up a little bit and tell you this. Your plane holds the blade at 45 degrees, okay? Your secondary, tertiary, primary, none of these bevels can ever exceed 45 degrees. If they do, what happens is that the heel will now touch before the toe and the plane will not function. So if your primary bevel is 25 degrees, you can work between 25 and 45 degrees without a problem. And I put my primary down here and create my secondary. I move over here and I create my tertiary. So each one has to be higher than the previous one in order for this to work, none of which can go above 45 degrees. Now, the other problem that you may be incurring is that, actually, there's 2 more things. One is, in the process of doing this, you're moving back and forth too much. You're not holding that fixed. What can I tell you there? Well, you've got to concentrate on locking the wrist, locking the elbow, and just pivoting from the shoulder. It takes a little bit, but it doesn't take a long time. Here's something that might help. I hate jigs because jigs rob you of the experience. What do I mean? If you use a jig like this to sharpen, and 10 years down the road, this thing seizes up on you, the wheel doesn't move anymore, and you got to go buy a new jig. You have to go buy a new jig because you've never learned how to sharpen. You've only been the motor that made that thing move back and forth. So what we do is all about developing skill. having a bag full of skills at the end of the day. So I developed this little thing called an angle trainer. It's a piece of composite. It's got two angles, 29 degrees, so your primary bevel is 25. Your secondary bevel is 3 or 4 degrees higher. That would make it 29. And then you move over and you do your tertiary bevel, and that one is a couple degrees higher than the previous one. That's at 31. There's 2 rare earth magnets in there that'll hold it. Now the way this works, and if you want to make it work even better, put a little dish detergent in your water, in with your hone right, to lubricate it. You set that down on the 29 degree side on the 1000 grit. And pardon me for doing a commercial, but you asked. Hold your blade. Now this is what's so advantageous about this. It allows you to do this the exact same way you would do it if you weren't using a jig or if you weren't using any kind of a device. In other words, eventually you'll be able to remove this. You're not going to have to alter the way you held your hands. So the muscle memory is already built in, and now you'll be able to do it freehand. Hold the blade like you were taught. Set it down here and slide it forward. Now the magnets will hold it at that angle. And holding it the same way, you can go in there, and that will maintain your 29 degree, and do that until you detect your burr on the back side. Then when you come over to your 16,000, you take that off, you turn it around to the 31 degree side. Set it on there. Hold your blade the same way you would if you were freehand sharpening. Somebody just buy one of these? Set it on there, slide it forward. Now it holds it 2 degrees higher. You go in there, do it the same way you would if you were freehand sharpening. At the end of your 10 seconds, you put downward pressure in one corner, followed by downward pressure in the opposite corner, and away you go. Take it off and go to work. Okay?
2 more questions. Larry Wilson wants to know, Rob, are you selling those diamond wheels yet?
Yes, they're on the site.
And what grid is the diamond wheel you have on your grind?
120. So so I've always told, I like this. This is, oh, sorry. Ken, where's your microphone? This is Ken, by the way. Ken has been one of our original online workshop members, and now came to work for us, and he's trapped.
That's right. Are you selling
So
those,
Larry says, Larry, are you selling those diamond wheels yet? And who asked about the grit? And what grit are they? Yes, we are. So if you go on the site, RobCosman.com, go to the sharpening one, which is the sharpening page, is what the other pages are going to eventually look like. We're making a transition. Luther's working on it right now. Down on the bottom right-hand side, you'll see the diamond wheels. Now, I've always told people that when you're going out to buy a grinding wheel, remember the primary bevel doesn't matter. Primary bevel never touches the wood. You buy as coarse a wheel as possible. Why? 2 reasons. Coarse cuts faster, coarse cuts cooler. Well, and I would get a 36 grit. These, however, are 120 grit, and they cut unbelievably fast. If we had time, I would show you. I'm blown away at how quick, and the fact that they do not overheat. I suppose you could if you really grind them in there, but at the way we do it, it never overheats. They go up to 180, but I don't know why you'd want to, unless you're using them for turning chisels, and then you might want a 180. Can I go back to work or any more? Okay. All right, so final step, and this is my, I always give credit where credit is due. David Charlesworth, and if you don't know who David is, you need to do more reading. David is probably the best craftsman currently alive in terms of precision. Not the fastest, but the best. And he developed this technique way back in the mid-70s. We call it the Charlesworth ruler trick. Now, the advantage of this is that if you go out and buy a brand new blade, everyone's always been taught the first thing you have to do is go in there and flatten the back. And on a blade 2 3/8 inch wide like this, you could easily spend an hour to an hour and a half flattening and polishing. Once you flatten, you then have to go and get rid of all the grinding scratches, and that takes you through multiple steps. And if at any point in one of those finer stones, you end up working on a stone that's not perfectly flat, you could lose that flatness, and that ruins it. You got to go back and start over. What David realized was that if you put that little steel rule on there, you're elevating the blade up off of the back by less than a degree, so it's not something that you're going to actually notice when you're planing. Work on the opposite side of the stone. So I'm securing this steel rule, not allowing it to move. I've got 3 fingers to distribute the pressure evenly. Working on the opposite side, I move that forward and back just about 3 seconds once you've already created it. So I've created this in earlier sharpenings. 3 seconds of polish, gets rid of the burr. Now you have a 16,000 grit tertiary bevel over on this side. meeting a 16,000 grit back bevel over in here, the result is a cutting edge at 16,000 grit, and that's going to give you the kind of finish that you're looking for. Now I'll show this to you real quick. And Jake sourced these new rules. The ones we were using were short, so you couldn't use your whole stone. So now we've got these wider, longer ones, and they're on our site as well, and it makes the process a lot easier. Anything that'll make it easier. So there is, you able to zoom or see? Yeah. And then if you look really close, there's a little wee polished strip on the back. Doubling it, tripling it, quadrupling it would not improve the cutting edge. So don't do it. Wasted time. Okay, so let's go through this since we're talking about it. Put the chip breaker on. Now this is, what's the matter? Put that on there. This chip breaker was actually one of the very first ones when I developed the chip breakers for old Stanley planes, and that's why there's two little knobs welded on there. Move that to within about a 32nd of an inch of the edge. I think I showed you this once already. Snug that up. And if you want to see, that's really close. What's up, Jake?
We're going to have to wrap up soon, Jacob.
Are we? Are we at the 45-minute mark?
Well, we're almost at an hour for the live.
Oh, really?
So
We're only supposed to be 45 minutes. How do we take back 15? Well, let me at least run the plane over the board.
Dan Miller wants to know if you have plans for building your workbench.
Dan Miller wants to know if I have plans for building my workbench. Well, Dan, better than that. The entire process of building this bench was filmed. How many episodes?
over 100.
100. Yeah, there's 170 half-hour episodes. Shoot, I got to move the throat back. So if you want that, you can go on Rob'sWorkshop.com. Now, I got to explain to you what I'm doing, but let me finish answering this question. Rob'sWorkshop.com. You can get a 1-month membership, a 6-month, 3-month, year, I don't know, whatever you want. It's all the episodes are on there, the entire process, all the screw-ups, all the changes that ended up in resulting in that. So my throat's down too tight. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in here and loosen the 2 outside frog retaining screws. So this was the bedrock feature of the old plane. And don't ignore that funky adjuster knob that got butchered. We're in the process of trying to make something a little bit easier to work with. This center screw controls the frog. It moves it forward, it pulls it back. When I'm dealing with highly figured wood and I need to have control of tear out, then I want to close that throat down to the point where there's just light getting through and nothing else. When I want to take a fairly heavy shaving, I've got to pull it back to open it up. Once I get it where I want it, I lock those 2 outside frog retaining screws, holds the frog securely in place, and now I can go to work. So I'm sighting down the sole, and when I'm amazed at how many times I've taught this to people and they can't see it. So right now I'm looking straight down. I'm looking parallel to this, and I can't see it. So I drop it down a little bit, and now I can see the toe and I can see the heel. And in the middle I see a fine line right here. That's the throat. I start turning my adjuster knob in a clockwise rotation as if I was behind it, and I will turn that. For crying out loud, I didn't pull that throat back far enough. If you this blade is thicker than the blade that was in there. Actually, you know what? They're the same thickness. I don't know why I'm having to do this. Hopefully that's enough. So, light colored background, blade tipped and plane tipped so that I can see about if you were to measure from the toe, the heel to the toe, I can see about a 1/2 inch. I can see that gap in the middle, and I just turn that adjuster knob until the blade shows up. Now, I see a thin black line, and I see more of that thin black line on the left than I do on the right. So I'm taking my lateral adjustment lever, that's this thing right here, lever for you Americans, and I'm going to push it toward the high side. So In this case, the left side is sticking up or protruding more than the right. So I'm going to push that lever. And I actually don't just push. I pull with my index finger, push with my thumb, gives me a little more control. Make a very small adjustment until I get that blade to sit parallel, meaning it is projecting through the throat the same amount side to side, and that will produce a shaving that is uniform in thickness. If it isn't, and I start planing with the blade a little askew one way or the other, you're going to throw your edge out of square with every pass.
Cody Bryant wants to know, with the 16,000 grit finish, do you have problems with finish adhering to it?
Cody Bryant asked the question, with a 16,000 grit finish, do you have problems with finish adhering? No problems. Now, you brought up an interesting point, so let me tell you this. I wish you could respond when I ask. Do manufacturers make finishes for sanded surfaces or hand-planed surfaces? Of course, the answer is sanded surfaces. If you've ever looked at a sanded surface, I don't care how high the grit, under magnification, it looks like a shag rug. You've got all these little fibers that have been ripped up. If they're small enough, they feel nice and smooth, but they don't look very pretty from up close. And you put your finish on and it adheres to those. Stains in particular. Stains will apply very evenly under those circumstances. What we're doing is we're finishing that wood and we're slicing those fibers with a blade that has been sharpened to 16,000 grit. Completely different look. Now, you're always best to experiment on a piece of wood that you've planed to see if your finish works well. I use two finishes. I use oil that gets rubbed on, and I use a lacquer that gets sprayed on. I have zero problem with either one. I don't use stains. If I want a dark wood, I'll use a dark wood. But you would definitely notice a difference. If you were to try to apply a dark stain onto a piece of maple, hard maple that's been hand planed, it'll look blotchy. Won't look very nice. Sandpaper will make it even, but like I said, you want dark wood, use dark wood. All right, so I guess what?
Marshall Rommel
Marshall?
said hi to Ed.
Oh, well, here. I got to do a little showing off. So, if you want a kid to go in the military, you name him Marshall Rommel. So Marshall was in our very first workshop. Marshall's a combat wounded vet, and he was in our very first Purple Heart workshop. Now, you want to see an awesome dovetail. This was his first dovetail, signed Marshall Rommel. I still have it. Look at that. How's that for bragging rights? Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. This was put together from the saw, no test fitting, and no pairing. I'm surprised he let me have it, and I kept it. Now, while I'm bragging about Marshall, I got to tell you a quick little story about that class. Typically, when I teach a dovetail class, we start off with doing sawing exercises, and we spend half the day sawing exercises, chiseling exercises, fret saw exercises, and then after lunch, we'll start in cutting dovetails. But everybody, before you can proceed with your dovetail, you have to make, we do 3 tails, you have to make 6 cuts, all 6 cuts on the tailboard, and they must all be perfectly perpendicular across the end of the board. 5 doesn't count. You cut it off, start over. And the average student takes about 12 to 15 tries before they get it right. So we're in the class. I have no experience teaching vets. I got 7 of them in there. These guys some of them are pretty busted up. And I didn't know what to expect. But 15 minutes into it, this guy named Philip Gustafson says, okay, I'm done. And I'm thinking to myself, whatever, I'm done. So I walk over and I look at it and I go, oh my goodness, look at that. It's perfect. What am I going to do with this guy? So fortunately, he screwed up. The way we cut dovetails now is you cut your tails, then you use your tails to mark your pins. Well, he did perfect pins. I mean, these were awesome. But then when he went to cut his tails, he removed the wrong part. Oh, I breathed a sigh of relief. So there was his first joint. That was probably, I think even to this day, this is still the best first dovetail that I have ever had from a student. And that is absolutely awesome. So Philip Gustafson, you still hold number 1 spot, brother. But you got Marshall right on your tail. All right. What am I doing? Well, let's make this thing work just before we sign off with these guys on whatever we are live. Tell us if you like this, and we'll do it every couple of weeks. So that was wax, and everybody always asks. It's just candle wax, not candle wax, canning wax, the stuff that your mother would buy in the grocery store to put up preserves. So what I do is I start planing with the blade fully retracted, and then as I'm planing, I start to advance the blade until I pick up a bit of a shaving. The wax simply helps reduce the friction. Now I've got a situation where the grain is radically changing directions on this piece of walnut, but with the blade good and sharp, it shouldn't matter. So, yeah, it allows you to pull off shavings that would measure with a micrometer somewhere in the neighborhood of 6/10, 7/10 of a thou. What's the next question?
PA boots, do you ever suggest for people to use Japanese hand saws when starting out?
Oh, you guys are asking me the good ones. So I got to read that again. So PA
Boots.
Where is them? PA boots?
Oh, right here.
Do you ever suggest for people to use Japanese hand saws when starting out? How many ways can I say no? Japanese saws belong in Japan. They're made for Japanese wood. I have one somewhere. I went through 16 saws trying to find the right one. This was back in the early 80s. And I was looking for a saw that would make a decent cut. And they couldn't. They'd have way too much set. They would drift off to one side or the other. They had cross-cut teeth. I'm thinking, cross-cut teeth, you're ripping. I didn't think I was the smartest or the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I knew that much. And it wasn't until I met up with Alan Peters that he showed me how to take a lousy saw and make it a decent saw by adjusting the teeth. Well, Japanese saws cut on the pull stroke. So the advantage that everybody, this is going to turn into a big commercial. The advantage that a Japanese saw is to the average person is it's so easy to control. The disadvantage is when you start getting into hardwoods, that little thin blade, so I need that, Ken, thanks. This is a piece of pine, so it's easy to cut. But it's all I have within walking distance right now. That little wee thin blade, Japanese saws blades can sometimes be as little as 12 thousandths of an inch. Thin, super thin, which by the way, makes for a really narrow kerf, but who cares? The kerf's in the waist, so it doesn't really matter. But that little thin blade gets into a piece of hard wood and it will wander and follow the path of least resistance. So we're not dumb. We've been doing this for a long time. So we have Western saws. Western saws are designed for Western hardwood. They have a stout, solid back that takes a relatively narrow blade. Now, you don't need a lot of distance here because rarely in dovetails you're cutting more than 3/4 of an inch. But with a heavy brass back this close to the tooth line, that will keep this thin blade nice and rigid, and it'll help it go through that wood and come out perfectly straight. Now, let me give you a little test. Jake, can you see if you can scrounge me up a piece of, actually, you know what? I can use this right here. I'm going to use this piece of walnut to show you this little test. Remember this, straight equals flat. So if your saw will cut perfectly straight, straight means shortest distance, point A to point B, the resulting surface will be flat. And you need that. If you have to go in and alter the surface that you just cut before you can assemble your dovetail, way too much work. That's not the way it's supposed to happen. You should be able to assemble that joint right from the saw. I'm not boasting. That's the way it was always done. If they did it like that 200 years ago, why can't we do it now? Well, we can. You just have to have the right tools. So here's the test. Get a piece of thick hardwood. This is 7/8 of an inch black walnut. Let me verify that. Might be a little under 7/8. It's 13/16. Come in about 3/4 of an inch and make a cut and go as deep as your saw will allow. Then turn it over on its side. And now I'm going to cut that piece off. Kind of a ratty piece of walnut. Okay, you got to look closely because we got a big old, the pith is right there. Now, this surface needs to be flat. That surface needs to be flat. I'm going to turn them around so we're not matching grooves. But when those two go together, it should result in a perfect glue joint. Can you see that?
Yep.
So now you have the side of your tail, the side of your pin. When it goes together, you end up with a perfect glue joint. If that's a ratty finish, and that's a ratty finish, lousy glue joint. But with a saw that cuts properly, now what would happen with a Japanese saw? That thing wanders. It looks straight on the front, it looks straight on the top, but you look over here and that little blade has done this. Followed the path of least resistance. And instead of that being flat, it's not. And now you got to go in and fix it with a chisel. Don't even bother. Now, what do? If you don't want to spend $250 to buy one of my saws, I did a YouTube video on how you can take a new, Jake, any idea where those saws are? You know those hardware saws that I fixed up? Anyway, somewhere on YouTube, if you search it, I don't know where it is. We just moved and I can't find half my stuff. Took a $15 Stanley saw, and I showed you how to go in and adjust the set and sharpen the teeth and fix it so that it would make a decent cut. But it lacks some things. It's wobbly, and where the handle meets the saw, it flexes, and you can still do a decent job with it. But I always tell people this. I said, why not buy the tool that you're going to end up with instead of buying or stepping up through various other tools that you're going to end up having to add to the cost of the one that you should have bought the first time. How's that for an answer?
Brian wants to know if you ever done an inlay dovetail. Where'd he go?
Who is that?
Cody. Oh, he's up here.
Cody. I'm looking for your question, Cody.
Where'd he go?
Corey Black? No.
He wanted to know if you ever. Oh, here it is.
Cody says, Rob, have you ever done an inlay dovetail? I think what you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, if you a butterfly joint where you have a crack that you want to stop cracking and you want to salvage that, where you go in and you inlay a butterfly, which is a dovetail facing a dovetail. Yes, I have. Do I do it very often? Nah. I'm not really into the fad right now among everybody is live edge slabs, and doesn't tickle my fancy. So I typically am not working with that type of material, but it's certainly a great way to prevent a joint from spreading. But you want to make sure you have enough splay so that the mechanical advantage is good enough that it won't allow it to continue to split, if that's what you were talking about. Anything else? By the way, if you could reach through the camera and feel that, Ken, come here. We'll have to have Ken do it. How's that feel?
Good. Smooth.
This affects your pay.
Like glass.
Now, so you can put a finish, you can go in and now you can put a finish right on that. And that looks completely different with a finish on it than it does if you had sanded it, because the sanding leaving all those little fibers. Cherry is the best example. Experiment, get good at it, and then finish a piece of cherry right from a hand plane compared to any grit of sandpaper, and it looks like two different species of wood.
Michael Pratt, he says, Rob, you make Dale Nish so very proud.
Michael said, Rob, you make Dale Nish so very proud. Well, Dale was my mentor. Dale took me under his wing. If I'm anything today in woodworking, it's because of Dale Nish. He said, you do the work, I'll open the doors, and that he did. I got to work as assistant to Anderson Ranch Art Center the summer of '87. I got to be assistant to Sam Malouf, Tay Frid, Alan Peters, Peter Korn, Silas Koff, Monroe Robinson. These are some of the biggest names in woodworking. And I got to know them personally and work with them and for them. And it was awesome. And that was all because Dale said, you know, you've got some talent, I'll open some doors for you. So Dale died a few years ago, but his memory is alive in me. Anything else? Frick is holding the camera, is getting tired of holding it.
Well, you want to save more.
Oh, we want to save some for the future, yeah.
Leave them
Okay.
on some more here.
So my last in parting words is my plea. If you know a combat wounded veteran that is suffering as a result of physical injury or mental injury, would you please bring him to our attention have him go to our site. The hardest part for them is they've got to sit there and write their story. And I know that's tough for them, but that's all we have to go by. As long as they were honorably discharged, they do need to have a passport because they've got to get into Canada. We cover all their expenses. There is no out-of-pocket for them on this. It's on us. We send them home with $2,000 worth of the best tools that they could buy, and we give them an opportunity through what we call distractive therapy to hopefully be able to control some of these demons that they're constantly battling.
Roger Scott said say good night, Rob.
Say good night, Rob. Roger Scott said that? Good night. See ya in 2 weeks.